Socy Dark Talks is back. Today, we're exploring 5 most true terrifying stories on Reddit social. These aren't just any tales. These stories are verified encounters that have left even the bravest of souls unsettled. Let's get started. Story 1. Neighbors Return. Ella grew up surrounded by the comforting familiarity of open doors and neighborly trust. Among these neighbors, Mr. Harold, an elderly man with a gentle smile and a treasure trove of stories, stood as a grandfatherly figure to young Ella. His cozy home was a haven for her, where she played with a worn Mr. Potato Head and savored the homemade cookies that reminded her of simpler times. Mr. Harold's son, Jacob, returned from military service with a demeanor that contrasted sharply with the vibrant spirit he once carried. However, Ella's mother, always keenly attuned to the undercurrents around her, sensed something unsettling in Jacob's quietude. One crisp autumn day, Jacob offered to take Ella and a few of the local children camping. Despite the innocent allure of an adventure, Ella's mother declined on her behalf, her instincts whispering cautions she couldn't ignore. Weeks later, while fetching supplies from the only store in town, Ella's mother noticed Jacob. His skin was a map of bee stings. He claimed a mishap at the creek, a place well frequented by locals without such incidents. His explanation hung in the air, awkward and unconvincing. Time passed, marked only by the changing seasons, until a chilling broadcast shattered their rural tranquility. A family, campers just like the trips he had proposed, were found murdered. No suspects, no leads. The news reverberated through the community like a cold wind. His mother, recalling her uneasy feeling and the peculiar bee stings, felt a shiver of dread. She contacted the police, offering her observations as a hesitant whisper of suspicion. Detectives descended upon their quiet life, their questions casting long shadows across the family's simple living room. They listened intently to Ella's mother, jotting down notes that fluttered with potential leads. Despite this, the investigation waned with no substantial evidence to link Jacob to the grisly act. The case grew cold, haunted by the detective's stern belief in Jacob's guilt. Years later, the unsettling truths Ella's mother had sensed coalesced into reality when Jacob was arrested for another crime. This time, he had preyed on a stranded motorist, his intentions as dark as the night she had found herself alone. His arrest brought little solace to the community, or to the memories of the night that had shattered their tranquility. Ella, now grown and reflective, often pondered the delicate balance between the openness that had defined her childhood and the shadows that sometimes lurked beneath it. The story of Mr. Harold's son served as a chilling reminder of the fine line between trust and the potential for darkness that could dwell just beneath the surface of even the most idyllic settings. Story 2. The Night Shift's Alarming Discovery. I worked the night shift at a large grocery store, one that wasn't open overnight but had a skeleton crew to work the loads and do prep and clean. I worked near the entrance, large glass doors that visually blocked off from my vantage point. Around 3 a.m., I hear knocking on the doors. This isn't completely uncalled for, usually. It's someone coming in for an early shift, but didn't have a key card. Sometimes it's someone's food delivery, or sometimes a customer who thinks we are open, despite clearly being closed. Approaching the door, I saw a man I didn't recognize, and he was drenched in the rain. He appeared normal at first glance, but something about him made me uneasy. He had that vibe to him. You know, the one where it seems like maybe they're on their way to becoming a full-blown meth head, but for now, they still manage to give the appearance of functionality. He was holding his shit together, just enough to appear normal, but the edges were shaky. Anyway, without unlocking the door, I announced that the store was closed. He told me that he just needed my help. His car had broken down in the parking lot, and he needed a boost. Through the barrier of glass, I informed him the store was closed. Undeterred, he pleaded for help. His car had supposedly died in the parking lot. I admitted I had no car, and thus no means to assist. Yet, compelled by his pitiful state in the relentless rain, I reluctantly agreed to check if any colleague could aid him. I did find someone willing to help and got the night crew manager involved as well. We went out. Turns out he was parked a bit off from the entrance in a fairly secluded spot, and he had a lady with him. There was a similar vibe with her, almost but not exactly normal. It didn't click right away, but I figured they had been hooking up in the car in the parking lot, maybe left the radio or lights on and drained the battery. To me, that explained the weird, unnerving feeling. They either felt ashamed or guilty, and it was showing through. Anyway, my coworker went over to help give them a boost. My coworker moved to jumpstart the car while the manager and I kept a cautious distance. After a tense few minutes, he hurried back, his expression one of urgent fear. We retreated indoors without witnessing their departure, an oddity in itself. Once secured inside, my coworker shared his relief at not being left alone with the unsettling duo. His unease was justified when he later revealed a chilling discovery. The car had no mechanical faults whatsoever. Their request for help, it seemed, was nothing more than a ruse, a disturbing facade masking darker intentions. Story 3. Phantom of the Theater. I was deep into a late-night session of scenic painting in the shadowy confines of a college campus theater. Outside, the world was swallowed by an impenetrable darkness, the kind that feels both empty and suffocating. Inside, the silence was palpable, broken only by the occasional shuffle of brushes and the soft clinking of paint cans. A few of us were scattered across the stage, absorbed in our tasks, communicating more through shared glances and nods than words. Without warning, a blur of movement caught my peripheral vision near the open doorway leading to the lobby. A chill prickled up my spine. "Did anyone else see that?" I muttered. The figure darted past the doorway again, slower this time, and the surreal sight came into sharp focus. It was a man with unkempt flowing hair, dressed in faded pajamas, barefoot, his feet barely touching the cold floor. Each step was an exaggerated tiptoe, knees pulled up high, accompanied by a wide, unsettling grin that seemed to stretch too wide for his face. The scene, though bizarre, carried an eerie undertone. Our group exchanged nervous glances, the air thick with tension. One of the other painters was just about to shut the door when the dude walked right in. He stood there staring at us for a full minute. Time seemed to slow as he stood there, his gaze sweeping over us, locking eyes with each person in turn. The silence was so profound, I felt it in my bones. With a dramatic flourish, he threw his arms wide and proclaimed in a voice that echoed off the walls,
"I am your Savior, Jesus Christ."
His declaration hung in the air, met only by our stunned silence. After a moment that stretched on forever, he turned and left as abruptly as he had entered. We quickly shut the door and locked it, the click of the bolt sounding unusually loud in the now eerily quiet theater. Security was called immediately. They were less than thrilled. It turned out this man was a known patient from a nearby group home, notorious for his theatrical escapes. To this day, every shadow in a theater, every unexpected noise, when I'm working late, sends a shiver down my spine, rekindling the unsettling memory of that night. Story 4. The Mystery Child at the Coffee Shop. At 3 a.m., the world outside was wrapped in an eerie silence, punctuated only by the occasional gust of wind that seemed to whisper secrets to the deserted streets. Inside the popular Canadian coffee shop, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and a lingering sense of solitude. The only company I had was the old baker in the back, a grizzled veteran of the sea who communicated mostly through lewd jokes and even more scandalous sea shanties from his Navy days. Apart from him, the place felt deserted, a hollow shell not expecting any visitors for at least another hour. I was busy packing up day-old pastries for the local homeless shelter when a fleeting movement caught my peripheral vision, a fleeting, shadowy figure that seemed to vanish when I turned. As I spun around, my heart skipped a beat. There, right behind me, stood a small child, a native toddler, his intense gaze fixed on me, hair styled into a striking faux hawk. The absurdity of the situation rendered me speechless. How on earth did he manage to get behind the counter unnoticed? The front door had remained undisturbed, and no one had passed through the counter. I scanned the empty shop. Nothing. No signs of anyone. I called out to the baker, half expecting him to know something about a visiting friend or a misplaced child. But like me, he was utterly dumbfounded upon seeing the boy. The child's voice was a low murmur, a string of incoherent sounds that made little sense. Quickly, I handed him a glass of water and a donut hole, hoping to comfort him, while the baker, spurred into action, dashed outside to circle the block, searching for any sign of the boy's guardians. Concern mounting, I dialed the non-emergency police number to report the unaccompanied child. Despite my attempts, the boy's responses remained mumbled and indecipherable. The police arrived swiftly. The baker returned shortly after, his search fruitless, the streets as empty and mysterious as the night. Attempts by the police to communicate with the boy yielded nothing more than mutterings and vague gestures. With no other options, they took him into their care. The next time I saw the police officers during their routine morning coffee run, they shared the startling backstory of the little wanderer. The boy ran away from home because his mother yelled at him. According to the camera, the boy also got lost in a cemetery 2 kilometers from home. That place was too scary for a child, but the boy seemed quite excited to get out of there. It must have taken that poor baby hours to get to me. The image of finding him silently standing there in the pre-dawn darkness haunted me, a chilling memory more unnerving than any confrontation I had never faced in the shop. From the guy who threw a pot of coffee at me, to the woman who tried to stab me with a plastic spoon because I refused to give her a metal one, and the dude who waited around for 4 hours, hoping to catch me alone so he could teach me a lesson, since I didn't have the flavor of bagel he wanted. Story 5. Midnight Distress Call. Late one stormy night, as lightning crackled across the sky, my phone shattered the silence in my room. It was my high school girlfriend, her voice trembling on the other end. She urgently whispered that something horrifying had happened, and she needed me immediately. Her words were sparse, her fear palpable. I hastily explained the situation to my parents and drove through the rain-drenched streets toward her house, my heart pounding with each mile closer. As I approached her quiet suburban neighborhood, the flashing lights of a police cruiser cut through the darkness at the entrance. A stern officer stepped into the beam of my headlights, questioning my presence. After explaining the distress call from my girlfriend, he nodded gravely and allowed me to pass. Cresting the hill leading to her cul-de-sac, the scene unfolded like a noir film set. Multiple police cars formed a perimeter, their lights painting the night in red and blue strokes. I parked shakily, and as I got out, the air was thick with tension. Suddenly, my girlfriend burst from her house, her face streaked with tears, and ran desperately into my arms in the middle of the street. Between sobs, she recounted the nightmarish events, a violent break-in at her neighbor's house. The attacker, wielding a heavy object, had brutally assaulted her neighbor. In a desperate escape, the woman had staggered to my girlfriend's home, pounding on the door for her life. With my girlfriend's father out of town, her mother had opened the door to a scene from a horror film. Their neighbor collapsed in the foyer, blood gushing from a grievous head wound. As her mother dragged the injured woman inside, she caught a chilling glimpse of the assailant advancing up their walkway. With adrenaline-fueled strength, she slammed the door just in time, the impact striking the attacker, who retaliated by smashing a small window with the bloody instrument he held. Inside, my girlfriend's mother's screams echoed as the attacker thwarted, and then he retreated into the shadowy street, disappearing into the night. I stayed with them that night, the house under the watchful eyes of law enforcement parked outside. By morning, the grim reminders were visible. A pool of blood still lay on the foyer floor, and droplets stained above the front door where the attacker had swung his weapon. The assailant vanished into the night, his identity and motives a chilling mystery, leaving behind only the echoes of terror and the scars he inflicted. The neighbor survived, thankfully with no permanent physical injuries beyond the scars where her scalp was stitched back together. Haunted by the ordeal, she moved away not long after, hoping to escape the shadows of that fateful night. As for us, the memory of that harrowing encounter lingered, a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and safety in our seemingly quiet lives. Don't forget to like and subscribe our channel so you won't miss out any creepy tales and scary adventures in the upcoming videos. This is Socy Dark Talks. Stay curious and embrace the darkness.